There was a time when the X-Men were not simply the face of Wolverine and the people around him. Originally, the X-Men were truly a team, where all the characters had almost the same argumentative weight and importance. And yes, among these characters, the mutant with the red lasers in his eyes stood out almost as the leader of the squad, becoming one of the most powerful members of the mutant team. But then if this is true, why did the X-Men movie show the character only as a simpleton who was bullied about by Wolverine? To go further, his girlfriend was cheating on him too. How did Cyclops, one of the most iconic comic book characters from the X-Men, get misrepresented on screen? We will explain that today in this video. But before we blast on further, if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button to stay up to date on our latest videos. It's one small click for you, but a huge deal for us. Thanks! Scott Summers, aka Cyclops. Let's go back to his origin story. Since he was a child, he had control over his powers, until a blow to his head caused him to lose control over the lasers coming out of his eyes. The presumed death of his parents caused Scott to end up in an orphanage, so Scott grew up in an environment of rejection, being excluded even by the orphans themselves because of how dangerous he was, giving way to Scott hating his powers, since without them he could be someone normal. All this led to fall into the criminal world as a thug, but he was rescued in time by Charles Xavier, who knew of his potential that Scott had. And this led to Scott becoming the first member of the X-Men, in which he was instilled with the idea that he should use his powers for the good of humanity and not to destroy it. Later he would fall in love with Jean Grey, another mutant with whom he could finally have a romantic bond without fear of being rejected. Years later, thanks to his maturity, charisma, physical strength, strategic skills, and his commitment to the X-Men cause, he was appointed the leader of the X-Men, a position that would lead him to have several conflicts with Wolverine, who didn't like being told what to do, even more so, because both are in love with the same woman. Both have different ideals and moral codes. Cyclops developed an unconditional protective attitude towards humanity, while Wolverine was a little more carefree about what was good for humans or not, causing both to clash on more than one occasion during missions. Like water and oil, they will never blend, making things quite tense in the team, due to the great power of both. The comics and X-Men cartoons showed Cyclops as a centerpiece of the X-Men, and actually, it was Wolverine who was on the sideline. So now comes the question: why did we receive a more watered-down version of Cyclops in the X-Men film saga? Well, here are the main reasons. 1. Hugh Jackman. We have to be honest, the only crime we know of Hugh Jackman having is being an excellent actor. But sadly, this was the crime that ended up overshadowing the character of Cyclops. At the beginning of it all, Wolverine was possibly everyone's favorite character, but even so, he gave the other characters a little bit of space to shine. And yet, in the script of the first film of the saga, Wolverine was only supposed to be as popular as in the comics, and all the other mutants would reprise the same character popularity too. But when Hugh Jackman brought the character to life, the entire X-Men universe began to revolve around him. Jackman managed to capture everything that people loved about the character: being a badass, a bitter person, and still maintaining the charisma that made people love the character. That led to him being the main hero of the stories, leading to the other characters having less screen time. 2. The image. Whether you like it or not, guys, but in the movies, appearance matter a lot. For example, John Coffey's innocent and kind attitude in The Green Mile would not have had the same impact if he had not been played by an actor as big and muscular as Michael Clarke Duncan, or Joaquin Phoenix's performance in The Joker would not have caused so many chills if he had not looked as skeletal as we saw him. And the powerful Cyclops is not as epic if he is not shown as he is originally. Cyclops has been shown as a tall man with big muscles, wearing his signature blue and yellow suit. That's what they should have given us, but instead, we got this. The saga wanted to give a modern and realistic tone to superheroes, wanting superheroes to be taken seriously. So putting serious characters in colorful and extravagant costumes would be somewhat weird. And also because of limited budget problems, the characters ended up wearing generic black leather suits to fit the times.
What would you prefer? Yellow spandex?
However, this now making them not stand out at all visually, like in the comics. And of course, it doesn't matter what Jackman was dressed as, he's going to kill it as Wolverine. Halle Berry and Famke Janssen also managed to do a good job portraying their characters. But regarding Marsden, when he's placed next to Hugh Jackman's Beast, he doesn't manage to stand out physically, unlike in the original comic stories, where we saw as Cyclops as a towering figure and just as menacing as Logan. 3. The approach to the character. Let's dive into Cyclops' past. All the traumatizing things ended up turning him into a superhero with several nuances and conflicts, such as the duality he has with saving humanity and at the same time being rejected by them, the desire of being normal and never having been born with his powers, the discovery that his parents are actually alive, the relationship with his brother Alex, and his loyalty to Professor X. That's a peek into Cyclops' mental issues, which makes him who he is. And yes, although later the younger version of Cyclops, played by Ty Sheridan, manages to capture some of these conflicts of the character, but if we go back to Marsden's version, we're left with another disappointment. It seems that the only purpose Cyclops has is to be Jean's boyfriend, and apart from that, the character had almost no time to be developed on the screen. And you may now wonder, well, why Storm and Jean Grey had more presence on the screen? Well, Storm was played by Halle Berry, more well known than Marsden. Also the fact she managed to win an Oscar in 2001 for a completely different film. However, as she is still part of the X-Men franchise, it just added more value to the saga. And Jean Grey simply because of the argumentative weight that she had in the Dark Phoenix story from the original comic books and cartoons. That was a huge part of the X-Men storylines, which overshadowed many other characters, including Cyclops, who would be pushed further into the background. 4. The budget. We have to take into account the investment that was taken in making the first X-Men movie, since it was the first of the saga and being high risk, so the producers kept a tight budget. Now, adding to this fact that Cyclops' powers entail a lot of destruction and CGI requirements, that implies a lot of special effects for the production company, and perhaps it was better to limit his action scenes to save the budget. On the other hand, with Wolverine, they simply had to use stunts for some fight scenes and some prosthetic claws on his hands that make everything much easier, depriving us of seeing epic scenes of Cyclops in full action. So in conclusion, we've summarized how Cyclops was absolutely nerfed in the X-Men movies, leaving us wanting to see a reprised Cyclops, maybe in his own solo movie played by a physical correct actor like Alan Ritchson or Henry Cavill. Although Ty Sheridan managed to show off a bit more with the character, the ultimate Cyclops that could have reached our screens and the most beloved of all was the Cyclops that the X-Men animated series brought us. That cartoon series gave us a Cyclops that we felt was truly a freaking badass. But have faith. Marvel may still have the door open to give us another Scott Summers. And that's it for now. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that Cyclops' character was treated unfairly on screen, or are you a fan of James Marsden's Cyclops? Who do you think would be perfect to play him in the future installment? Drop a comment on this video, and if you're new to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. And tell us what movies or series you'd like us to deep dive into next. This video is made by movie fans, for movie fans.